What's coming up now for a lot of people who are getting engaged is the realization that like, there's no dates left for 2022. Everybody's booked. Like you're not going to get a Saturday anywhere.
Right.
Friday, Sunday dates are going really fast. And so that's like the setting of expectations at the beginning is tough because you don't really know. And you're like, oh, we just got engaged over Christmas. Let's plan a fall 2022 wedding. And then like everything's booked for then. So that's another like real kind of like eye opener, I think, early on in the planning process.
I think so too. I think it's especially crazy right now, but I think that's pretty common in general, right? Like,
yeah. I think it's definitely worse this year in terms of how quickly stuff got booked. But I think in a lot of places, wherever you are, like whatever your sort of popular venues and vendors are, they get booked up a lot further in advance than people would normally think.
Right. Yeah. You can always elope, but a little plug. So we have Leah on the show again, and we are going to talk about her book. Leah, can you actually introduce yourself again? We talked with her about Pantone Color of the Year previously, and now we're going to talk about her book. It's just so timely, and I think that in our last episode with her, we talked about it a little bit, and it's really a book that's written that hasn't been addressed before. So let's just jump right into it. Tell us about your book. What's the name? All the good stuff.
Yeah. So the book is called The Wedding Roller Coaster, Keeping Your Relationships Intact Through the Ups and Downs.
Can you show it again?
Yes. Here it is. It's nice and hot pink,
Ooh.
very colorful. So yeah, I wrote it for engaged couples to kind of help them prepare them for the emotional side of wedding planning, because I didn't feel like there was a resource out there that does that. There's tons of books on how-tos and like the actual components of a wedding, but nobody really talks about how to ask your parents for money to pay for the wedding, or, how to talk to your partner about some of those tough conversations beforehand, how to deal with firing a member of the wedding party if it comes to that. So there's a lot of different components to weddings that I felt like needed to be addressed from the emotional side. And I did some research. I read psychology books, so that way I could actually attach concepts to what was going on. I talked to a lot of different experts. I have stories from real couples in here. So I really wanted this book to kind of cover a lot of what people are going to encounter when they plan a wedding.
Yeah. So actually, I think this is relevant. What was your previous career? It's always nice to be like, she does research, folks.
Yes, I was a commercial real estate attorney before starting ColourPop events. And so I've always been like, a little nerdy, a little academic. Yeah. I wanted to actually write this sort of like book that's a combination of academics and actual psychology concepts with a lot of interesting stories from things that I've seen, from things I've heard from other friends, from real people that have gotten married. So yeah, it's very rich content.
Yeah. Is there any little nuggets you could share with us? Anything that like resonated, or maybe the hardest thing, the thing that surprises people the most, that's the hardest thing about planning their wedding? Something like that, like the hardest question or the thing that they have to address that like comes up pretty regularly, I would say, that people are a little bit surprised about.
I think it's money.
I think
it's how you have to approach money, because I think like just in general, money is a big stressor for people. It's not something that people talk openly about. Kind of like a society, it's a little taboo to talk about money. But the thing is, when it comes to wedding, if you're just like looking at it objectively, you can't start planning a wedding unless you know how much money you have to spend. Right. So that means having, open and honest conversation with your partner about how much money you have to spend, what you're comfortable contributing, what your priorities are. Do you want to completely self-fund it? And then if you're talking about accepting contributions from outside sources, there's a whole lot that comes along with that. Because I, as a planner, obviously have this conversation with all my clients. And some clients have said, oh, my parents are going to pay for it. They say they'll pay whatever it costs. And I feel like in some cases, parents don't know how much a wedding in New York City for 200 guests costs. And so I'm like, that's nice and all, but we really need to drill down on a specific number, because we need to know. And one of the things that I will do is, if in order to help them with their conversations with those parents, is to kind of draft a budget and say, based on the venues I normally work at, based on the vendors I usually use, here is what I would expect things to cost. And then that way they can kind of take that to the parents or whoever is helping out financially and say, this is what we're thinking. And then that helps start the conversation. But it's so awkward to have to go up to someone who's offered to, like, if someone says, oh, we want to help you pay for the wedding, and then you actually have to be like, well, how much are you going to give me? I mean, that's so awkward.
I have to do that too.
Yeah. I mean, you have to, like, I get it. Like,
there's guilt. It feels weird.
Yeah. It feels taboo. It feels tacky. The guilt thing is actually, it's great that you brought that up, because that comes up in a lot of situations. If one person's family is paying for the whole wedding and the other person's family is not, or if families can't contribute equally. So I've definitely had those conversations where they felt guilty accepting the money. And again, it's not, it's not great to have to say, but I have to say, but you either have to get over that, or you're not going to have this wedding like you've envisioned. So it's kind of like, we have to talk through how you get over the guilt, how you like lean into accepting the money. Cause obviously they're doing it for you because they love you, because they care about you.
Right.
But there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of baggage that comes along with it.
Yes. And this is all stuff like, you're newly engaged. Whoa, let's plan a wedding. Oh,
yeah. That's like the first brick wall you hit. Yeah. And the other thing too, I mean, what's coming up now for a lot of people who are getting engaged is the realization that, like, there's no dates left in 2020. I mean, in like bigger cities, there's no dates left for 2022. Everybody's booked. Like, you're not going to get a Saturday anywhere. Friday, Sunday dates are going really fast. And so that's like the setting of expectations at the beginning is tough, because you don't really know. And you're like, oh, we just got engaged over Christmas. Let's plan a fall 2022 wedding. And then like everything's booked for then. So that's another like real kind of like eye opener, I think, early on in the planning process.
I think so too. I mean, it's especially crazy right now, but I think that's pretty common in general, right? Like, yeah.
I think it's definitely worse this year in terms of how quickly stuff got booked. But I think in a lot of places, wherever you are, like whatever your sort of popular venues and vendors are, they get booked up a lot more than like a lot further in advance than people would normally think.
Right. Yeah. You can always elope, but it's a little plug. But yeah, the awkward conversations, and I mean, you can kind of take them as a like a building your relationship. Like, this is the first muscle you have to work when building your relationship with each other, is like, these are kind of weird conversations that you just, you don't think about when you're starting to plan your wedding.
Right. I mean, and if you haven't talked about before, whether you're having kids, whether somebody's changing their last name, if you are having kids, like the question of what religion are they going to be brought up? What are we incorporating, any kind of religion or culture into the wedding? How are we handling our money after, once we're married? It's a lot of stuff. And yeah, you got to talk about it beforehand, because otherwise you could be in for some surprises afterwards.
Yeah. And some uncomfort.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing your book goes through, I mean, just a myriad of different situations, circumstances. I think you address a whole section on COVID.
There's a standalone
came out.
I wrote a separate chapter on COVID and talking just about the emotions that came with that. And I mean, there was like the interesting thing that not a lot of people they might be subconsciously aware of it, but consciously there was a lot of grief that was coming along with weddings that during COVID that were either being postponed or canceled or significantly downsized. And it's like, our clients were mourning the loss of this wedding as they had envisioned it, when they had envisioned it. And so we, as vendors, like really needed to be conscious of that and allow them to kind of like move through those five. I mean, the book talks about the 5 stages of grief, which who would think that like that's going to come up in the context of a wedding, but it does. And in a lot of ways too. So again, I'm encouraging people to talk about these things because a lot of people don't, and they can be uncomfortable situations and uncomfortable topics for people, but you're going to be better off having kind of worked through all of these things beforehand.
Yeah, beforehand, because you don't want to get to your wedding day and then be having the conversations on your wedding day.
Yeah.
That's even more awkward.
Yeah.
And you want to, that day wants to, be something that you remember, all the stuff we hear about. Right. But I have so many, couples that, friends or whatever, that have gotten married, and they often say like, oh man, I don't even remember my wedding day, or it was so stressful. And going through this book, reading this book ahead of time would definitely help with that.
Yeah. And one of the things,
be present for your experience, basically.
And it also encourages people to think about in advance at the beginning, think about how you want to feel on your wedding day. So that way, throughout the process, you're kind of working towards that goal, and even plan moments to kind of stop and pause, or to take a minute separately for you and your partner to just kind of reflect and take it all in. Because if you don't have, it goes by in a blur no matter what. Yeah. So being intentional and kind of like setting those emotional priorities for the day is going to have you, like, you'll have a completely different experience on your wedding day.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I love this topic.
We could talk about it.
I know. I
have a whole book on it,
and
I
don't really want to divulge your whole book in the episode of the podcast, but I just think it's a brilliant conversation to have. I think it's kudos to you for going deep and writing about it and asking you had to ask these uncomfortable questions of people. And I guess you probably do on a regular basis. I think planners in general often take on, a very heavy listening role. They have to listen and they have to advise, and these things are probably things that continually come up for you too, so
for sure. Yeah.
So anyway, kudos to you for writing them down and, doing all the research and all that stuff. I think that this is really a helpful thing for people to know up front. Love to, gift this to all of our clients, so.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of vendor friends and even friends, like vendors that I don't know, like it's become part of like their onboarding process, is like they gift it to their clients because it's just so helpful to go through it in advance. And to lighten the mood, there is a chapter on guests behaving badly with some really fantastic, funny stories about the weird stuff that guests do at weddings and how they misbehave.
Definitely some weird stuff.
Yeah. A lot of bad behavior.
I mean, broad daylight, but it's just that's what's happened. Like you're not invisible. But well, thank you so much. I think this is great. Can you remind us the name of the book and how to find you and all
the book is The Wedding Roller Coaster. It is available on Amazon. My website that has additional details on the book is colorpopevents.com. I am at Colorpop Events on all social media platforms, so feel free to follow along. And any questions any listeners have, I'm happy to talk about this topic all day long. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us again. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me back.
I'm sure we'll be in touch. So thank you.
Good. Thank you.